going to be looking over some of my favorite podcasts. So I'm excited to see what he put in there. I just know that it's going to be his favorite podcast. That is what he told me. Let's get into it.
I think in our lifetime, just regular people will be able to live on some type of interstellar mass, whether it's the moon or some type of man-made structure or something like that?
In our lifetime, and I'm thinking like, yeah, I think so. I think right now, obviously the cost is astronomical. It's like $200,000 maybe for someone just to like dip to the edge of low Earth orbit. I think that will hopefully go down because that isn't also sustainable for companies. And so you'll literally have like 7 people that live in space. So I think the goal is to lower the cost, and especially when you have things like...
So before it goes to the next one, I love this podcast. I listened to this with my husband. This is Camp Gagnon. This gentleman is also with Andrew Schwartz on Brilliant Idiots. And I know he does some other things too, but the first thing you see when you look at him is he looks like Jesus with his long locks. But the great thing about his podcast is he does really in-depth conversations with some really cool people, all different types of backgrounds. So whether you are looking at learning more about gut health, relationships, personal inner work, he also does conspiracy theories. He covers just about everything on his podcast. So it really is a good listen. So if you're looking for a new podcast, I would definitely check out Camp Gagnon and see if it works for you, because I really like it.
3D printing and AI design, it will help bring the cost down. And I do think it will be a lot more accessible.
One of the hazing rituals they did on us when we were going through training, they would make us dig out our own graves and they would put us in the ground for a night. If we freaked out, we wouldn't be strong enough mentally. There was Santa Muerte stuff around. There was a lady there who was a Santa Muerte priestess, and she introduced us to the whole concept of death and life. She gives you a few secrets when you get dug up. One of them is you're already dead. And I remember hearing that one. It's like, time's a construct. It's always now. You're being born, you're suffering, and you're dying all at the same. It's all now.
Americans are the only mammal that doesn't sleep with its young. Societies all around the world and for all of human history, people sleep together because it's safer. Babies and young children get their sense of safety from proximity to adults. The way babies like calm themselves down and know they're safe is they can smell you, they can feel you, they can hear you. I mean, that's how humans have done it for hundreds of thousands of years. And you know what? Even a modern American family, if they went backpacking in like Bob Marshall Wilderness in Montana, I tell you what, they wouldn't have a separate tent for the babies, right? Like they would all sleep together.
This is so interesting.
So why would you not do that at home? I mean, you get so much sleep. If the baby wakes up another way, you have to get up and whatever. If you're all sleeping together, even if the baby wakes up, they nurse back to sleep or what have you. So
Well, let's pause there for just a quick second. I think that's very common in a lot of households, especially new mothers, new families, or even, parents who have had a few children. When their babies are little, for the most part, they sleep in the bed. How many of you have been so frustrated with your partner? Like, it's time for the kids to get out of the bed. I want our time. I want our space back. I want our bed back. I think that's a huge thing. And what he's saying is that, it makes it more comfortable. People are doing it out of need of necessity as well, too, especially if you are in like a camping type situation or just what he was talking about. But I think that's very common, especially when your kiddos are little, because you want them to be close. You want to be able to check on them. Now, I do know there is a flip side to it where you're not encouraged to sleep with your infants in your bed because accidents can happen and you absolutely wouldn't want that to happen. So make sure that they're at an age where they're just a little bit more prepared for it, but that you're always aware of your surroundings, especially if your kids are sleeping with you. But I do know a lot of moms do that, especially when they're nursing. It's so much easier just to have the baby in the bed. You roll over. My mom would always say you just plop a tit in his face and then, boom, you're good. But that's kind of how it's been forever.
Taking place in one place.
20,000 people a year were sacrificed in some way by the Aztecs. The Aztecs believed that the gods played a part in everything. According to Aztec mythology, the gods had endured immense suffering and even sacrificed themselves to create the world. Tlaloc was particularly worshipped during specific months in the Aztec solar calendar. To gain his favor and appease him, it required offerings that were a little bit more sinister. The tears of children. As the crops dried up and the threat of famine grew, Aztec priests would declare that Tlaloc required a sacrifice to quench the thirst for moisture. The children would be led into to a process adorned with flowers and garments and celebrated not as victims but as saviors. The more the child was scared or terrified, that the more pleased Talok would be, and thus more generous he would be with his reins. How did these sacrifices actually happen? Why would they eat someone from another tribe? One victim would be chosen, and the Aztec priest would remove the heart. So let's find out if that's true.
Wow. See, I told
These
you
things
deep.
happened. Alex and Donna Vutsinas were looking through their old photos to put in their wedding video. They found one where Donna was a kid in 1980 visiting Disney World. They looked closer at the photo.
This is the Y Files. I love this one. I'm kind of a nerd at times, a little geek. I kind of geek out to things. This is a great one. He talks about kind of conspiracy theories but he has all of the evidence to back it up. He has stories. He has interviews on there, and it's pretty awesome. He doesn't like directly interview a person, but he'll show interviews of the subject that he's talking about, the person in different interactions. It's phenomenal. So it's the Y Files, and what's great about it is he also has a little tiny goldfish who does like animation on the side. You're going to have to look into it, but this is a real good one, the Y Files. I would absolutely take a look at this podcast if you're looking for a new podcast. His videos, I believe they're about 30 minutes long. They might be a little bit longer. Don't quote me. I will tell you, my husband likes long form podcasts, long form videos, to the point where I'm like, 2 hours. My attention span is compared to his. He could lock in for 2 hours. 3 hours if you let him. And I'm just like, honey, I want to watch 5 in this time. So absolutely check out the Y Files. You will not be disappointed. He has a plethora of videos. So if there's something that you don't like, scroll on to the next and you'll find something.
In the background was Donna's husband, Alex, as a child, being pushed in a stroller. The odds of getting hit by a meteor are 1 in a trillion. When a meteor crashed into a home in Paris in 2011, the press rushed over to check on them. They were fine. Their name was Comet. World War I broke out after Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in his car. The license plate of the car was A111118. World War I started on November 11th, 1918. This one's nuts. In 1975, a 17-year-old boy was killed riding a moped. Exactly 1 year after that, his 17-year-old brother was killed on the same moped, in the same intersection, and hit by the same taxi, driven by the same taxi driver. They were also carrying the same passenger.
There's no way. How does that happen? The exact same moped, a year later, same taxi driver hits you. I mean, come on. So I'm telling you, see how he has like the conspiracy theories or the wild stories, but there's all of the evidence to back it up. If you are looking for something to binge, type in the Y Files and have a wonderful week or weekend or night, because it'll take you to some places. But make sure that you have time to focus on it and that you're not distracted, because you're going to want to lock in for the information.
These things happened. Jennifer Bricker was born without legs and put up for adoption. Despite having no legs, Jennifer develops a love for gymnastics and idolizes Olympic gymnast Dominique Moceanu.
That's right.
Jennifer has posters of Dominique all over her walls and watches all of Dominique's events on TV. One day, Jennifer's parents come across her adoption papers. Jennifer is actually the sister of Dominique Moceanu.
No way.
In 1895, there were only 2 cars in the entire state of Ohio. Somehow, they crashed into each other. Then there were no cars. The seemingly meaningless sentence, "Here was I like a psalm," is an anagram for William Shakespeare. But is it really meaningless? In Psalm 46, the 46th word from the beginning is shake, and the 46th word from the end is spear. Know how old William Shakespeare was when the King James Bible was published in 1611?
46.
46.
You just blew my tiny salty mind.
Ooh, I love that little goldfish.
There's a funny trick they teach, which I'll teach you. It's not part of my warmth cues, but I'm going to teach it to you because I think it's interesting.
Real quick, you are about to be put up on some game. And I know that what podcast this is because we have watched this together. My husband has made me sit down and watch this. And I'm certain that this is the Diary of a CEO. This interview is, oh my gosh, it's a game changer. You need to go find this episode. You need to go on the Diary of a CEO and look to find this one with her on here. The way she talks about, you know what? Let me stop talking and let me show you. It's a game changer. If you need this, you need to watch her. You need to watch this interview, because just watch. I'll let it speak for itself.
Mm-hmm. Don't let anyone use this on you. Okay.
And nobody at home used this on anyone else?
Don't use this on anyone else. But so there's this thing that NLP people will do, or pickup artists will do, where they move their hand like this, and the other person will begin to nod, because typically when we do this with our hand, the other person starts to nod, which makes you think, I agree, I agree, I agree.
What are you doing for anyone that is watching?
I'm moving my hand up and down in a nodding yes motion. And so what I've noticed very manipulative people will do is they'll be doing this, they speak like, don't you understand what I'm saying? Do you get this? And the other person will start to nod. And I've seen entire audience will start nodding. And then you think to yourself, well, I'm nodding, so I must agree with this person. It's a secret way to get someone to secretly agree with you. So just be careful and make sure no one uses that on you.
There's so much more in that. Oh my gosh.
On June 20th, 1941, Soviet archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Tamerlane, a descendant of Genghis Khan. An inscription read, "Whoever opens my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I."
They didn't open it, did they?
They sure did. And 2 days later, Germany invaded Russia. December 5th, 1660, a ship sank in the Menai Strait off the coast of Wales. There was only one survivor. His name was Hugh Williams. December 5th, 1767, another ship sank in the same place. 127 people died, but one man survived. His name was Hugh Williams. On August 8th, 1820, another boat sank near the River Thames. There was only one survivor. His name was Hugh Williams.
You see what
In
I'm saying?
1940, a boat sank off the coast of England. Only 2 people survived, a man and his nephew.
I bet you his name is Hugh Williams. And talk about the synchronicities in this story. Do you see? You just can't make this stuff up. And he has oh my gosh. He backs it up with the stories, with the dates, with the names, with the information. Could this information could it be false? I don't know. But I will tell you, it all seems too spot on for me. Let's see. Is this gentleman's name going to be Hugh Williams?
Let me guess. One of them was named Hugh Williams?
Nope.
Oh.
They both were.
Oh, no.
Oh!
No. No
These
way.
things happened. When they filmed The Wizard of Oz, they wanted the wizard to have a coat that looked elegant but worn out. The wardrobe department bought one from a thrift store. While wearing the coat during the movie, the actor playing the wizard found a note in one of the pockets. It was a label that said the coat belonged to L. Frank Baum. L. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz.
No.
Henry Sieglin decided to leave his wife. She was so upset that she took her own life. The wife's brother, out for revenge, shot Henry Sieglin in the head and then took his own life. But the bullet had only grazed Sieglin and got stuck in a nearby tree. 20 years later, Sieglin was trying to remove a tree from his yard with dynamite. The explosion did destroy the tree, but also blasted the 20-year-old bullet out of the tree, across the yard, and into Sieglin's head, killing him instantly.
That bullet had his name on it for years.
Abraham Lincoln and JFK were both assassinated in office. But what about these coincidences? Both were elected to Congress in 46 and were elected president in 60, 100 years apart. Each of their names contains 7 letters. Both presidents, while in their 30s, married a socially prominent 24-year-old girl who spoke fluent French. Both first ladies lost a son while in office, and each son's name contained 21 letters. Both presidents were shot in the back of the head on the Friday before a major holiday while seated beside their wives. Each assassin went by 3 names, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, and each of their names contains 15 letters. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and ran to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy in a warehouse and ran to a theater. Lincoln was shot in Ford's theater. Kennedy was shot in a Ford Lincoln. Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln. Both assassins were shot to death before they could be brought to trial. Lincoln and Kennedy each had vice presidents from the South named Johnson that took over. Andrew Johnson was born in 08. Lyndon Johnson was born in 08. And their names each contain 13 letters. Freaky.
When you do speak,
Abraham Lincoln and JFK were...
Okay, so I do not want to come off as a conspiracy theorist. Sometimes I do, but that's none of your business. But the stories that he just told you, all of the coincidences, the exact same type of storyline, does it feel as if this is all scripted? What are the chances of that? What we just learned. What are the chances? The shooting, the deaths, the year apart, the amount of years, everything to the same. I'm telling you, sometimes it feels like that we are in the Truman Show and everything is just scripted and they just keep replaying the same plays. They just keep doing it like, you know what, go back and get that script. It was a good one. It worked. It worked 100 years ago. Bring it back out. We'll use it again. No need to stress. No need to do it the hard way. We'll just keep putting this stuff on a loop. The information goes over and over and over again. The fact that both of the wives could speak French, both of the wives lost their first child. I mean, it's just too close. It's too close. I tell you what, It's too close. Let's go to the next
both
story.
assassinated in office. But what about
Let's
these?
get back.
When you do speak, do you look at people when you speak? Do you project your voice? So it's called paralinguistics. Everyone's so focused on what they say, like reading my notes or reading my agenda. They don't think about the tone, pitch of the voice.
Yep.
How are you delivering this? Are you projecting your voice? Do you talk like this when you speak? I have a question. I just want to share something. People are going to like glaze over. I have a question. Even just
Okay, I'm going to pause this real quick because I actually listened to this interview off of The Diary of a CEO just last Thursday when I was at work. It was a phenomenal interview. She hit on things that I had not thought about. And what she was a former CIA agent, and she was just talking about how she's like a walking lie detector. She's able to read body cues, body language, tell if a person's lying in all different ways. But more importantly, she really does understand the study of people and from her own personal experiences. And she goes over a variety of different type of backgrounds that she's been as far as in her work and what she has experienced, whether it be good or bad. And she's talking about how to like show up as a person and how to just be more confident in yourself. And in this instance, she's talking about how we carry our voice or how we're perceived by our voice and how we project ourselves. Now, this is something that I've struggled with because in the past, I was born and raised in customer service, and it was always a higher octave, like, oh, how are you doing? Always very pleasing to the customer, to where I just couldn't stand it because that's not my real voice. I'm not as nice as that. Honestly, it's put on. But if you're doing that for so many years, you just get stuck in it. So when she was talking about this part, as far as like really finding your authentic voice and what your voice sounds like, that is something that I've only been able to do as late as my late 30s and early 40s. And I'm being very honest with you. I was a people pleaser for so long that I would adjust my tempo to their tempo, or, you know, really having that background in customer service or always just feeling like you had some sort of imposter syndrome, which is a very real thing. You know, I climbed the corporate ladder in my life very fast and always wondered, do I belong here? But to listen to her throughout her entire interview and talk about certain things that hit me so close and so personal, I'm glad he put this in here because this is an interview you absolutely need to see. She just did this interview on Diary of a CEO last week, so it's very new, it's very recent. I think there's something for everybody to figure out, whether how you communicate with people in the workforce, at home, personal, whatever the case may be. Are you a person who shows up at work as she would describe it as a T-Rex, someone who is always just, you know, very blunt in your face? Or how do you respond to a person who is like that to you? Do you become a lion to where you're very dominant, I'm going to run the entire conversation? Or do you become a mouse, which is very meek, very quiet, very soft? Either way, she's talking about the different types of communication skills and just what to see yourself and why it's best in certain cases to play each of those roles at certain times, but as long as you're playing the better version of it. It's, oh my gosh, I could go on forever just about this one podcast right here, but I will not say anything else. You go find it for yourself. My husband is killing it with this. These are all really good podcasts, especially if you've never heard of them and you're looking for something that's just going to give you food for your brain. A lot of podcasts, depending on what you're listening to, or if you just doom scroll all day, it's not doing anything for you. Get something that fills you up, grows your brain, and, you know, helps you. And this was a really good one. She was top tier, I tell you that. Let's get right back to it.
Just the tone, how you hi, I'm Evie. Hi, I'm Evie. Feels different. Those are simple things you can do to make sure people hear you. The other thing is, don't just talk to talk. There's this thing out there, and especially with women, make sure they hear you. Make sure your voice is heard at the table. I'm fine with that. Do you have something beneficial to say or a value to say? Because if you don't say anything. Half the meetings I go to, I don't speak because I have nothing to say. People think like I have to talk because everyone tells me I have to talk, make my voice heard. No, shut up.
You can't be too aggressive in this world because you offend too many people. So maybe if you were a pharaoh or a king, you could do that. You didn't pay consequences. But as the world has become more and more democratic, you can't be so overt in your power moves. You have to be subtler. Seduction is a high form of power because you make people feel pleasure. You make them feel excited or interested in you, and then their resistance to your ideas slowly lowers, and you have the ability to influence them and to move them in the direction that you want. If you yell at them, like how we were talking about your child, and you tell them, do this, do that, they're resented, and for good reason. But if you're subtler, if you're more seductive in your approach, if you're more indirect, people will do what you want or go in your direction without ever even realizing it.
Beating 99% of people is simple, not easy. You show up early, you prepare the night before, you remember everyone's name, you say no to opportunities that don't bring value to your life. You follow up quickly, you follow up multiple times, you deliver value at every interaction with the other person, and you never make the same mistake twice. The more I've done this, the more I've realized that it's about doing the basics at scale consistently that makes you advanced, and that's how you win.
But my brother has no idea he's the hot guy now. As far as he's concerned, he's still Gumby. He don't know. So he's stationed just south of me in Los Angeles. He's stationed in Coronado Island. So he comes up on the weekend and we watch ball together, as any good Kentuckians do. And we're sitting at this LA sports bar watching ball, and this little LA booby girl, honey, comes bouncing up to him. Excuse me, can I have a cocktail napkin? My brother, y'all, without turning around, grabs a stack of napkins and goes, yeah, there you go. I'm waiting, she's waiting. Finally, she just bunny hopped off in defeat with her napkins. That works every time. And I wait till she got out of earshot. I said, Dave, buddy, what are you doing? That little thing was hitting on you. He goes, Trish, that's a crock of crap. When you went to take a piss, 3 other girls asked for the same thing. This place has crap customer service.
People with disabilities in general, I think it's just stigma of incapable because you look a certain way or because you're confined in a certain space, or the world is not built for that. The world is built for, run in, walk stairs, shower, even just step. Like, people forget that there are people who can't do those things. And they're a lot of the time left out. And in those moments, I've learned that because I've faced it myself. I think in my journey, it's interesting because I've had to face so many different parts of life and lived so many lives for maybe short amount of time, but at least in those moments I've been able to relate and to live with maybe something that someone does have to live with forever, and how strong you have to be and what it takes every day to face a world that isn't really made for you or accepting of you, or just because you look a certain way, you're immediately judged or just seen as you can't do it, and that's not true.
Tell me about the OCD.
I have to do 30 pull-ups on a scaffolding.
Fuck, that's funny.
I did them earlier before you got
30
there.
pull-ups on a scaffolding.
I'll literally leave the cellar, I'll do a set, go out, find a scaffolding that no one can see me, do 30 pull-ups and go back to the cellar and be like, boy, I got a good slice of pizza.
Do you have to go to City Hall and see who's doing construction? Zip code, Google searches?
Yeah, I have an...
So if you don't know about blocks, you need to go look it up, favorite it, pin it, bookmark it, do whatever it is you need to. It is a completely different style of interviewing on a podcast. So Neil Brennan, he's a comedian, right? You might know him from Dave Chappelle. He's a writer for him. They have a lot of, history together, but he has created this show called Blocks. And it really comes from his stand-up show called Blocks, where he's talking about very personal stuff in his life growing up as a child. He had a very volatile life, a very abusive father that he was raised under. He loved his mother, but his life was very sketchy. It was very hard at times, and he had a large family, and he just never really felt as connected to these people. So he talks about it on his comedy show, and then somebody gives him the idea, you need to do this on a podcast. One of his friends, who's also another comedian, but I can't think of the name right now. So he starts this podcast, and it's called The Blocks. And what he does is he'll invite somebody on. Let's give an example, Bert Kreischer, or even Nikki Glaser, or Whitney Cummings, or David Lucas, any comedian that you could think of, he will bring them on there. But before they come to the show, he sends them a list of, talk about your childhood trauma. Talk about some things that, triggered you or things that you're still dealing with. And it doesn't even have to be childhood trauma. It could be something you're dealing with right now. Is it anxiety? Is it fear of being left out? Do you have a drinking problem? Whatever it is, or how do you feel about yourself internally? And then he asks you questions while you're on his show. And then as the person sitting there being interviewed, they'll talk about something, and then boom, above their head will come a block, and it will be talking about that, like lack of self-esteem, anxiety, childhood trauma. And then they will go deep on these topics to where you will hear a different perspective of a comedian or whoever it is he invites on the show, because it could be writers, it's a variety of people. But either way, you're learning more about these people than you ever had on any type of interview. And more... The biggest thing that you could take out of it is you start to learn stuff about yourself, and you start to look at how you perceive yourself and maybe what might have hurt you or affected you when you were a child that you never dealt with, or in your 20s or in your 30s or even in your 40s, whatever the case is. There is unresolved trauma that all of us deal with that he goes deep in on these podcasts. And you're thinking he's a comedian. Why would he do that? Because most comedians suffer from all of that stuff. That's really the makings of them. So if you were looking for a new podcast, I would definitely check out the Blocks podcast with Neil Brennan. He has a variety of people on there. I love it. I love it. I love it. Really good podcast. Check it out.
Contract?
Everybody thinks they're a therapist now, and everything on TikTok is like, you have this. It's like therapy is now astrology.
I think it's an insult to astrology. Almost everyone thinks astrology is stupid, but almost no one thinks... some women think astrology is real. Almost everyone. You can't get insurance to cover your astrology. Although in California, I got to think it's got to be. Grief, ADHD, social anxiety, addictive personality.
It's so funny coming into this podcast. I don't talk to anybody about any of this shit.
Yeah.
I really don't. I've just started.
Well, do you think it's weakness? Meaning, did you avoid it?
Oh, I've told my mom to go to therapy, and she's like, "Yeah, it's not for us. Like, we don't do that." We come from.
Sebastian is your mom?
I go to a therapist.
My family don't do any of this. No therapy, no bettering.
Believe it or not, but the leaves on trees and grass, anything with chlorophyll, is highly reflective of infrared light. What that means is that if you go outside on a sunny day versus going outside on a sunny day surrounded by green spaces, you're going to get probably 2, 3, 4 times more infrared light in that environment than you would without that environment. You can check this out. You go to Google and just type in infrared photography and click images, and you will see any kind of infrared filtered light. When it shows a tree or grass, it looks like it's lit up like it's got snow on it. It's bright white. It's very reflective. On a hot summer day, if you go outside and touch some object that's in the sun, it's going to be extremely hot. Touch a leaf. It's not hot at all. It's because it's reflecting that light. In fact, the coolest place in a garden on a hot summer day is where? It's under a tree. Because all of that infrared light is being reflected off. So we know from years and decades of data that people who live in green spaces have reduced diabetes, reduced hypertension, reduced mortality, just living in green spaces.
You ask yourself, what bothers me about me? Okay, now you have a domain. You think, well, man, some of those things, I don't know how to fix them. Fine. Don't fix them. Fix some of the things you could fix. We talked about that. Or make your goddamn bed in the morning. Like, you could do that. Like, you see people, their lives are so chaotic. Like, their living environment, every single bit of it is a catastrophic mess. Sometimes multiple generations deep. It's just chaos everywhere. It's like, where do you start dealing with chaos? Wherever you can. Put something in order by your own standards of order. And then see what happens, because what'll happen is now you got a little corner of order, and now you're a little more well situated, and then you'll be able to see what's the next step. And you might think, well, it looks hopeless because there's just chaos everywhere. It's like, it's okay because the process is exponential. So even if you start nowhere, if you keep doubling, you're going to get somewhere and faster than you think.
One of the biggest pieces of advice I give my
college students is to study without your phone near you. Because Princeton studies have looked at this, where you have somebody do, say, a math test or a studying test with your phone there versus a phone in the other room. And you see like double-digit increases in performance just to have your phone away. And you might ask, like, well, why would that be? It's like, well, part of your frontal lobe is like, no, don't look at the phone. Don't look at the phone. Don't look at that big wheelbarrow of delicious, interesting stuff. Stay on task. And that's this kind of constant moment of multitasking where we're kind of yanking our brain back onto task. And so a big hack, if you want to be more present, is to find ways to do activities without your phone. I guess if we go back to that fun question, if I said, those 3 times you're having the most fun, you weren't in the middle of it pulling out your phone to like look at your Instagram feed. You were just there.
Being present.
I don't want to use the word happy. I want to see you joyful. Joy. Joy is more important than happiness. Joy is a state of mind. Happiness is, okay, yeah, I set a list of things I want to have and I have them and I smile a lot. Joyfulness is this sense of being in yourself, and I would like that. I would personally like to see you enjoying today and this weekend, and that's it. And everything else is going to come to you.
That's a good
Is going to failure more effective than not going to failure?
This is going to generate a lot of discussion in the comments. I can't wait to see it.
So I can't think off the top of my head what this podcast was named. I can't think of it. I know that I've seen this over my husband's shoulder because there's a lot of podcasts that he just watches by himself because, like I told you at the beginning, my attention span at times, that he gets completely submerged in it. But you see the common thread in these podcasts. It's very much about self-improvement, learning, teaching yourself, learning from a different person's perspective, watching interviews happen with people that you might not necessarily get to have a conversation with, being a fly on the wall in these very intense but very educating conversations. So that's the common thread in all of these podcasts. My husband really digs for substance. He's a miner for substance, if you would say that. So I will try to figure out what the name of this last podcast is and leave it in the comments below, or you might know what it is, so you drop it in the comments below. But either way, we're just really about evolving over here and learning more and educating ourselves. So I think these are really good podcasts if you're looking for something new. Let's get back to it.
So I'm going to cite quite a bit of work from my powerlifting coach, Zach Robinson, because he is at FAU, just finished his PhD, and did a lot of meta-regressions and meta-analyses on this exact topic. So I'll give you the answers first that are straight down the line scientific answers, and then I'll explain things. For muscular hypertrophy, you need to get close to failure. But you probably don't need to train to failure to maximize hypertrophy, but you got to get pretty close. You can be stronger, but to maximize strength, you're probably better off not touching failure very often. So there are a few studies now looking at this, showing that I think there was one study recently, and I can't remember the exact details, but I remember it being pretty well designed. And the takeaway was hypertrophy was similar between the groups, but the group that went to failure or stayed a few reps shy of failure actually got stronger compared to the group that was taking most sets to failure.
And did they control for total volume of work?
So,
because I can imagine not going to failure, you can do more sets because you've got
and that's exactly
more quote unquote gas in the tank, right?
And practically that may be a benefit of stopping shy of failure, right? But they control for those variables. So when we talk about volume, the way we define that is essentially number of hard sets, which a hard set would be a set close to failure. The general consensus is within 5 reps of failure is considered a hard set. Now, what I will tell people is that may not sound like much. Most people have never truly pushed themselves to failure.
A lot of people think that the key to feeling better is to vent your emotions. There's research on this. Venting is good for strengthening bonds between people. It's good to know that, we're buddies now. I could call you up if I'm struggling. You're going to listen to me and empathize with me. That's great for our relationship. But if all you do is just validate what I'm going through and you don't take the next step to additionally help me look at that bigger picture and problem solve, I leave the conversation feeling really good about my relationship with you, but the problem is still there. So just venting ends up leading to what we call co-rumination, which can be pretty harmful. The people on my chatter advisory board, they know to first validate, empathize with me, learn about what I'm going through. They've got my back. They communicate that powerfully. But then once they do that, they start working with me to broaden the perspective, to try to think through that problem, which I'm having difficulty doing sometimes when the chatter is really, really loud. And, typically when I get to that stage, I'm in pretty good shape.
When it comes to reducing BPA exposure and some of these forever chemicals that you mentioned, it seems like reducing fluid intake from plastic vessels is going to be number one.
The primary source of BPA is in the lining of cans. So any drink or soup or anything that comes in a can.
Any can, all cans.
Any can, unless it's a high-end, elite company that's made the change from BPA to an alternative lining. And they'll say that. So, and by the way, BPA has some bad relatives, such as BPS and BPF. And maybe you'd be interested in this story. So when it came out that BPA was estrogenic, which is what it is, and by the way, it's kind of the evil twin of phthalates, because phthalates are anti-androgenic and BPA is estrogenic, and phthalates make plastic soft and BPA makes plastic hard. You don't want either. Okay, so when this came out that this was a bad thing, the manufacturers started selling things that say BPA free. I'm sure you've seen that. The trick is that instead of BPA, they use BPS.
Sneaky rats.
And BPF. And these are chemicals, these are lookalikes, they're analogs, and they're just as harmful.
Is it true that microwave safe means that the plastic won't melt in the microwave, but it's...
Do never put plastic in a microwave. So here's the story. The BPA, phthalates, plasticizers are added to the plastic, but they're not chemically bound to it. Okay? So if you put anything in a container that has these chemicals in it, they will, and then put it in a hot environment, they will come out of the plastic and go into the food. So if you, in a microwave, or you put your bottle in the car and the sun comes in and it warms up the bottle and then the stuff goes into your water. You don't want to mix these chemicals and your food, but if you do, the worst thing is to do it in a heated environment.
We're going to pause right there. And
is it true that microwave safe means...
So you might think, well, yeah, I know that I'm not supposed to put plastic in the microwave and I'm not supposed to heat up my food in it, but a lot of people don't know. And we try not to use our microwave if we don't have to, but I know of people who don't use a microwave at all and only have a toaster oven in their home for good reasons. So kind of do with that information as you will. But I will tell you, today's been a really good day of a different type of podcast for us to watch together and for you to learn about if you don't already know about some of these. The first one that we saw was Camp Gagnon. Sometimes it's like a tongue twister for me. Say that 3 times fast. Camp Gagnon. And then we had the Y-Files, which is really good podcast. I told you it kind of talks about those conspiracy theory things, but it brings up the receipts. It has the evidence. It has all of the background stories to it. Also, the Diary of a CEO, which is just phenomenal. I listened to another one of his podcasts last week where he was interviewing Mr. Beast, which was, come on, if you have time, go seek out that interview. You're going to learn so much about that gentleman. It's mind-blowing. But either way, you can see kind of, like I said, the common thread of all of these podcasts. It's just about self-development, personal growth. It could be whether you're learning something about financial literacy, which is something that we really look into as well. I love a lot of tax podcasts. That's a big thing, especially being a business owner. I can submerge myself. I get very hyper-focused in learning about taxes. That's not anything that came up today, but I swear by podcasts, especially if you're someone who loves to read but you don't have time. It's the next best thing to Audible. Audible, you get to listen to the books, but I love listening to conversations of other people and learning just so much more than I might have had access to just based on where I'm at. So I thank you guys for tuning in today. I appreciate all of the new viewers. I appreciate all of the new supporters. This is a really cool channel. We tend to go over a variety of things. I like to react on just funny things that kind of give me good dopamine shots, but then I also like to talk about this heartfelt stuff that I feel like can help people, and because if it's helped me, it's helped my husband, it could potentially help you, and that's really what we're here for. And then I like to talk about politics because it's spicy. So thank you so much. much. Make sure that you're subscribed, hit that bell, and share it. I'll see you next time. Peace out.